Good evening, everyone. Welcome. This is the Tuesday, December 6th, 2022 meeting of the Carrboro Town Council. Welcome. It's glad to see all of you here tonight. This is our final regular meeting of the year before we go into sort of a holiday recess. So we've got some important business before us this evening. But we're going to start out with usually the most important business, which is our poet laureate, Fred Joyner, whose term, as I think many of you know, is ending as poet laureate after 3 amazing years with the town. And so this will be his last night reading for us as poet laureate, although I hope he'll be back sometime in the future. Fred, welcome. For his last time.
I refuse to clap for your last.
Yeah, this is really very, very bittersweet, and it's been a blessing. I say this often, that it's a blessing to live in a place where I can use my gifts and talents in a way that I think is edifying and add something to something that's already going on. You all have an amazing community, and what you all do, what you all are building here and continue to build, and what you all are building and continue to build has been a blessing to me. So what you enjoy of me is partially an expression of what you have given to me living here. I'm going to read, if you'll indulge me, I'm going to read 2 poems. One by someone else, by an ancestor poet, and then one of my own. And I may have read it before, but I think the message is what I want to leave you with. So this poem is by a very important American poet, Margaret Walker. This is a relatively new collection. This was her new and collected. And one of her most famous poems is called "For My People," and it really doesn't require much. If you know about Margaret Walker, it doesn't require much explanation. But just by way of, she spent most of her life teaching and advocating for Black people in higher education, and so when you read her work, she lived from 1915 to 1998, and so she went through a lot and made great sacrifices to teach the people that she taught, and but added so much to our lives. And so this is a poem called "For My People," and it's a little long. I'm gonna get right into it here, but it's important to pay respects to our ancestors and the people whose shoulders we stand on. For my people. For my people everywhere singing their slave songs repeatedly, their dirges and their ditties and their blues and jubilees, praying their prayers nightly to an unknown God, bending their knees humbly to an unseen power. For my people lending their strength to the years, to the gone years, the now years, and the maybe years, washing, ironing, cooking, scrubbing, sewing, mending, hoeing, plowing, digging, planting, pruning, patching, dragging, along, never gaining, never reaping, never knowing, never understanding. For my playmates in the clay and dust and sand of Alabama backyards, playing, baptizing, and preaching, and doctor and jail and soldier and school and mama and cooking and playhouse and concert and store and hair and Miss Chumby and company. For the cramped, bewildered years we went to school to learn how for the cramped, bewildered years, we went to school to learn to know the reasons why and the answers to and the people who and the places where and the days when, in memory of the bitter hours when we discovered our black and poor and small and different, and nobody cared, and nobody wondered, and nobody understood. For the boys and girls who grew in spite of the things, to be a man, to be a woman, to laugh and dance and sing and play and drink their wine and religion and success, to marry their playmates and bear children and then die of consumption and anemia and lynching. For my people thronging 47th Street in Chicago and Lenox Avenue in New York and Rampart Street in New Orleans, lost, disinherited, dispossessed, and happy people filling the cabarets and taverns and other people's pockets, needing bread and shoes and milk and land and money and something all our own. For my people walking blindly, spreading joy, losing time, being lazy, sleeping when hungry, shouting when burdened, drinking when hopeless, tied and shackled and tangled among ourselves by our unseen creatures who tower over us omnisciently and laugh. For my people blundering and groping and floundering in the dark of churches and schools and clubs and societies, associations and councils and committees and conventions, distressed and disturbed and deceived and devoured by money-hungry, glory-craving leeches, preyed on by facile forces of state, and fad and novelty by false prophet and holy believer. For my people standing, staring, trying to fashion a better way from confusion, from hypocrisy and misunderstanding, trying to fashion a world that will hold all the people, all the faces, all the Adams and Eves and their countless generations. Let a new earth rise. Let another world be born. Let a bloody peace be written in the sky. Let a second generation full of courage issue forth. Let a people loving freedom come to growth. Let a beauty full of healing and strength, of final clenching, be the pulsing in our spirits, in our blood. Let the marital song be written. Let the dirges disappear. Let the race of men and women now rise and take control. That was Margaret Walker. Get this book. Go to just get this. Even if just for this book, even for this poem. This is a poem that when you get discouraged, you read this. Read this poem and realize the space that she was writing from. And it's a sermon. The poem is a sermon in and of itself to us, or a sermon, or anything that whatever it is that uplifts you, whatever word that it is that uplifts you, think of it that way and read that when you feel disinherited or dispossessed. So I'm going to read this last poem. This is my poem. This is from a collection of poems that you can go out and get to. This is from the Furious Flower Poetry Center at James Madison University. It's an anthology called Fierce Flower, Seeding the Future of African American Poetry. It's an honor to be in this. I have 2 poems in here, and I'm going to read this one poem. And I dedicate this poem to you all, and to you all, because we're builders. We're building something as a community. This poem is called The Builders. I wrote this poem in thinking about when I lived in Washington. I was living in Washington at a time of rapid gentrification. And I was watching people who were building all these expensive homes and expensive condos that I know they could not live in. And so this came to me, and then I started to think about the art world and literature and what I think I'm trying to do with my work. And then this poem came to me, To the Builders. Our hands speak the language of artifacts. Under a Saturday sun, we obey the call of our hands, the burn of builders aching in your palm, the breath of story tellers stirring in mine. We build to leave the world different than how we enter. Leave evidence. A syllable is a brick. A single inked word on a page is a monument in the face of a white horizon meant to erase us. Thank you so much. It's been a blessing to serve in this role. I'm going to get down from here before I get emotional. And I have to acknowledge my parents back there. Can y'all raise your hands? Dad. And then I have to acknowledge my wife, Melanie, and my two daughters, Erica and Naomi. Raise your hands. It's been a blessing. Thank you for entrusting me to do this work. And I'm not going anywhere. I'll be around, and I look forward to doing more of it.
But
So thank you.
You got to stay right there, though.
Oh,
You can't
boy.
You gotta stay right there.
stay right there.
Now you can just
Move a little bit to the right.
thank you, Fred, and thank you all for being here. I know some of you actually came out to see Fred tonight, and it means a lot to us to see you here. We get to do this every week, is hear Fred recite a poem to us, and it's a pretty special experience. I also want to mention, before I read this proclamation, that two members of this year's Youth Advisory Board are in the audience, Isha and Nevaeh. And I'm not sure if they believed me when I said that we start our meetings off with a poetry reading, but now you know it's real. I wasn't joking. I thank them for being here as well. This proclamation is one that I issued on Friday evening at the Arts Center. Mr. Dom Flemons, who was performing that night, and many of you know is one of the founding artists of the Carolina Chocolate Drops and or music historian, really, was performing, making a return to the Arts Center, and was so kind to allow Fred and me to stand on the stage and take his spotlight for a few minutes at the beginning of the show to read, so that I could share this proclamation of Fred Joyner Day, which is today. Whereas the town of Carrboro established the position of Poet Laureate in 2002 to enhance the reading, writing, and appreciation of poetry in the social and civic life of Carrboro. And whereas Carrboro's current Poet Laureate, Fred Joyner, was appointed in 2019 and has served the town for 3 years, service that has included membership on the Carrboro Poets Council, some of whose members are here tonight, which organizes the annual West End Poetry Festival. And whereas also in 2019, Fred was selected as a Laureate Fellow of the Academy of American Poets, one of only 13 poets chosen from across the United States for their literary merit to, quote, enable them to undertake meaningful, impactful, and innovative projects that engage their fellow residents, including youth, with poetry, helping to address issues important to their communities, as well as to create new work, which Fred has continued to do. And whereas Fred's kindness and humble spirit are community treasures, and whereas Fred is an active student of history, whether visiting the National Memorial for Peace and Justice and the Legacy Museum in Montgomery, Alabama with his church family, or reading and sharing insightful books like My Grandmother's Hands, as he has done for us here in this council, as well as a student of the writing of prose and poetry as a mirror of things that were, things that are, and things that are yet to come. And whereas Fred's own poetry choruses with references to Black history, hope, trauma, and tragedy, which echo in his poem, 7 Ways of Looking at Black Flowers. Against a white sky, like a fistful of Sea Island cotton, the sky raining blood on black flowers. In our world, the tongue speaks only a binary song, always a black flowering problem against a white canvas, blood in between. And whereas Fred is known for carrying a suitcase of his favorite well-worn poetry books to share with poets and non-poets, and whereas Fred has continued the tradition of opening meetings of the town council by reciting his own and others' poems that inform and inspire the council, as well as the audience, both present and tuned in. And whereas during his term, Fred has organized poetry readings at Epilogue Books and curated storytelling and creative writing workshops with people experiencing homelessness. And whereas Fred served as the chair of the Orange County Arts Commission and helped spearhead the creation of an art space in the Eno River Mill in Hillsboro to support artists and other creative people in our community. And whereas Fred has been at the peak of the artistic world in Washington, D.C., serving on the boards of nonprofit organizations such as the American Poetry Museum and starting the Center for Poetic Thought. And whereas in addition to publishing in numerous poetry publications, Fred was the winner of the Divine Comedy Poetry Contest, sponsored by the Smithsonian's National Museum of African Art. And whereas the true place of Fred's heart is his faith in the Black experience, like the street preacher in his poem Sermon on the 94. Hold on, he speaks, talks himself out of a stumble, still preaching his sermon to the day's weary. He stood there as if waiting for his word to take root, waiting for flames to reveal themselves, refusing to be shut up in marrow. He was speaking to me. His message did what all good sermons do, met me at the crossroads, moved me beyond doubt. Now, therefore, I, Damon Siles, Mayor of the town of Carrboro, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim Tuesday, December 6, 2022, to be Fred Joyner Day in Carrboro, in gratitude for Fred Joyner's leadership and service as Poet Laureate of Carrboro and his invaluable contributions to the life and spirit of our community. Thank you, Fred.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I stand on the shoulders of giants. My parents back there, my family right here, Margaret Walker, all these people. So this is it's a blessing, and I have a poetry family here. The Poets Council is part of that. Paul is a part of that. Liza now is a part of that. So many people, so many people are a part of that. So again, I'm thankful. I'm thankful for my gifts. I'm thankful for all of you for this honor, and thank you so much for this honor. But it's communal. We've done this. And so I'm thankful. I hope that as you end this day, find some poems, find some poetry in your life. Not just poetry on the page, but real poetry, real beauty out in the world. If I could leave you with anything, do that, because we need it. Mm-hmm. We need a lot of beauty and love, and so yeah, do that. That's the way you can. Somebody sent me an email and said, "So how do we celebrate?" And I said, "Find beauty." So thank you so much. I'm really humbled, and thanks to my mom and dad and for my family for being here. Thank you.
Express gratitude also to members of the Carrboro Poets Council who had a pretty big hand in drafting the proclamation that I just read. So thanks to the members of the Poets Council. Barbara?
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Fred. To everything, there is a season. And you have no idea what a balm in Gilead you have been for me. Don't cry. I appreciate you so much. Your poetry was always thought-provoking, heartfelt, and always connecting the dots. And I just appreciate you so much. I will miss you, but we're going to get that coffee. Yes. We're going to get the coffee. And also, want to again say thank you to his parents, to his family here on the front row. He's an amazing, amazing human being. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. I should also mention before we move on, folks, that our soon-to-be Poet Laureate is also with us this evening. Liza Wolfe Francis is with Fred, sitting behind Fred, and we'll get a chance to get a chance to know each other very soon. I may have this wrong, but maybe y'all can help me with the date. I believe there's going to be a celebration in January of both Fred and Chapel Hill's outgoing Poet Laureate, C.J. Suit, January 28th. So look out for news about that if you want to find another opportunity to celebrate these great poets in our community. So. January 28th, 6 to 8 o'clock at the Century Center. Thank you, Liza. Okay, one other matter before we get into the business of the meeting. We have a resolution, and I know several of the folks who contacted us about this resolution are here from the Women's International League of Peace and Freedom. And I see several in the row here, including some raging grannies are with us tonight, which is always fantastic. Heard from Lucy Lewis a while back, both Barbara and I did, about the possibility of signing Carrboro onto an international cities appeal for nuclear nonproliferation, which is what we're doing with this resolution that's before us tonight. And so I asked Barbara if she would read the resolution to get it into the record and introduce it.
Is anyone coming up to the podium with me? I'm gonna get some raising granny energy.
Grannies are welcome to the podium if you like, or
Or you can stay there. A resolution to join the city's appeal of the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons. Whereas the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, ICAN, is a coalition of non-governmental organizations in 100 countries promoting adherence to and implementation of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And whereas, am I saying that right? Is it ICAN or?
Yeah.
I can. Whereas ICAN was awarded the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize for its work to draw attention to the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of any use of nuclear weapons, and whereas ICAN launched its city's appeal to raise awareness in local communities and the media, recognizing that urban areas are the main targets of nuclear weapons, and whereas the North Carolina Triangle branch of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom has requested that the town of Carrboro join the city's appeal, and whereas since 2012, the town of Carrboro has been a member of Mayors for Peace, an international coalition of more than 8,000 municipalities, answering a call for cities to transcend national borders and join in solidarity to work together to press for nuclear abolition. And whereas on June 17, 2014, the Town Council adopted a resolution supporting resolutions by the U.S. Conference of Mayors, calling on the U.S. government to participate in good faith in international nuclear disarmament forums to demonstrate a meaningful commitment to its disarmament obligations and to reduce nuclear weapons spending and redirect those funds to support safe and resilient cities and meet urgent human needs. Resolutions the U.S. Conference of Mayors renewed most recently in June 2022. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Town Council that the town of Carrboro, North Carolina, does hereby join more than 500 cities around the world in adopting the city's appeal of the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons, which reads as follows. Our town is deeply concerned about the grave threat that nuclear weapons pose to communities throughout the world. We firmly believe that our residents have the right to live in a world free from this threat. Any use of nuclear weapons, whether deliberate or accidental, would have catastrophic, far-reaching, and long-lasting consequences for people and the environment. Therefore, we support the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and call on our governments to sign and ratify it. This is the 6th day of December 2022.
Thanks very much, Barbara. Can I take that as a motion to introduce the resolution?
Motion to do just that.
there a second? Seconded by Eleazar, that we adopt the resolution that Barbara just read. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. The matter passes unanimously. I do want to thank Lucy and the other members of the league for encouraging us to do this. I know that the city of Asheville has adopted a similar resolution, and that part of the hope of these kinds of resolutions in these kinds of cities campaigns or cities appeals is to get other municipalities around the country and around the world to do the same thing. And as you heard Barbara say, there are already about over 500 cities and towns around the country or the world actually that have done this. So I'm glad to join them. Lucy, I don't know if you or your colleagues wanted to say anything, or you do. Okay, welcome. Yes, please.
Let's see. Let's get it. I love her. She's the best.
Well, I want to thank you, Councilmember Fouché, Mayor Sales, and council members for passing this resolution. I wrote down a couple notes because I wanted to make sure I hit a few things I wanted to say. First, I just wanted to appreciate you for this important effort. There's so many pressing issues in our community that you all have to deal with every day. And the issue of nuclear threat and nuclear annihilation is one that many folks would like to ignore or deny or normalize, and as well as the costs that we spend millions of dollars of the tax dollars for our Carrboro residents on maintaining and modernizing nuclear weapons instead of using them on the current of the issues of poverty and homelessness and so many needs of our community. So I just want to thank you briefly for understanding the relevancy of this issue to Carrboro and our residents, to understand the relationship between this issue and all the other issues you deal with, and for taking a stand, joining the 68 nations so far that have ratified or acceded to the treaty, for taking a stand, for speaking out, and for setting an example to other communities that this is something that they need to be aware of, that they need to stigmatize, need to help prohibit. I'm here on behalf of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom Triangle Branch. WILP is one of the 10 NGOs, non-governmental organizations, that are part of the International Steering Committee for ICANN, and it's modeled on the international campaign to end landmines. And we know that eventually that passed, that there's a stigma against landmines, against chemical weapons, and there needs to be the same kind of prohibition of nuclear weapons. So I just want to thank you for Carrboro once again leading the way and for your attention to this important issue. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And thanks to the rest of you from the league for being here tonight too.
All the Rachel Brandy from the tonight are also signing the grants, and I also mentioned that I have my here. As we end the last council meeting for the new year, I think this is an appropriate way to go into it with some hope for the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Okay. Next, we're going to move on to the announcement of upcoming meetings. Madam Clerk?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This weekend on December 10th at 8:30, there's a Town Council retreat at the Rizzo Center. And that's scheduled for 8:30 to 5 o'clock, so it'll be a long day. Then on December 12th at 7 p.m., there is a Recreation and Parks Commission meeting. That's at the Carrboro Century Center. On December 14th at 6 o'clock, there's an Arts Committee meeting, and that meeting is virtual via Zoom. Also on December 14th, there's an Economic Sustainability Commission meeting at 6 o'clock, and that is in person here at Town Hall. And then also on December 14th, it's been changed from the 21st to the 14th. It's the Board of Adjustment meeting at 7 p.m., and it's here at Town Hall. Then on December 15th at 7 p.m., there's a Climate Action Team meeting, and that's virtual. And then on December 21st, there's a Racial Equity Commission meeting at 6 p.m., and that is virtual via Zoom.
Thank you, Mary. I'll just note for folks who are here tonight and who may be listening that this Friday evening at 6 o'clock, right here in front of Town Hall, is our annual tree lighting. We have a brand new real tree this year, which we're very excited about, which you may have seen planted in front of Town Hall a couple weeks ago. So I hope you all will come out at 6 o'clock on Friday evening to be a part of the celebration. Any other meetings that were missed? Sammy?
Yeah, I just want to encourage folks. Carrboro is joining the Triangle J Council to solarize the Triangle. We have an event to share information about this opportunity on Saturday, December 10th. There are 2 sessions, one from 10 to 11 and another from 11 to 12 here in the boardroom. And basically, it's an opportunity to aggregate our purchasing power with other people from throughout the Triangle to draw down the cost of implementing solar, and even included our batteries. So it's a great opportunity to, if you've been thinking about doing solar, spread the word, please, and let folks know about this so that we can treat the climate emergency like the emergency it is.
Thanks, Sammy. Susan?
Thank you, Sammy. And I just wanted to add one more event to Friday night, along with our Christmas tree lighting event. Friday is also going to be Carrboro Staff Holiday Luncheon, 12 o'clock, Century Center. So hope to see some of you there.
Which is not open to the public, just to
Not
be
open to
clear.
the public.
But town employees, please show
The town
up.
employees hope to see you there.
Thank you, Susan. Randy?
Yeah, I just want to come behind Sammy and tell you that I was in contact with the Solarize folks. It's free to get a consultation, and it's well worth it. I have looked at solarizing 4 different times. This price point is excellent, and the more people who sign up, the more opportunity we have to lower the price point. This is the time. So come on down and take it seriously. And if nothing else, just give the folks at Yes Solar a call. You can do it all by telephone.
Thank you, Randy. Okay.
And they didn't pay for that commercial.
We'll move on to the next agenda item, which is our public comment period. We have a few people signed up to speak on items that are not on the agenda tonight. And so see, one of them is on the agenda technically, although it's on the consent agenda. But why don't we include that here? I'll start first with the first name on the list, which is John Burkholz. John, are you here? Okay. Next is Maureen Berner. Welcome, Maureen. And Maureen, as I think you probably know, we ask folks to keep their comments within about 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
I'll start a timer and make weird hand
tested
signals.
it.
Yeah,
And tried to time it. So, yes, just under 3.
appreciate it.
I'm speaking on behalf of my name and address first. That doesn't count, I hope. Maureen Berner. I live at 106 Glasshouse Lane, just off Old Pittsboro. I'm speaking on behalf of the Community Works Board. My remarks have been updated versus those submitted online earlier.
Thank you.
On behalf of the Board of Community Works, we wanted to take this opportunity to thank the town for its longtime support of the Community Works thrift store. Community Works stands for Carrboro. It recycles everything so that neighbors in the town don't have to. It provides clothes, kitchenware, furnishing, books, toys, tools, holiday trees. You could have asked us. Everything in an affordable way for folks who can't afford much. It's the only place in town to buy a basketball. It embodies diversity, equity, and inclusion. I volunteered there for 20 years next to folks who are new to the country, new to town, new to having a job, new to having to perform community service. We are led by managers and staff who are Black, brown, members of the LGBTQ+ community, and almost entirely women-led. We support one of the most innovative nonprofit social capital incubators through YouthWorks, the members of which serve disadvantaged youth, all here in Carrboro. Our values are literally painted on our walls. I'm not here just to brag about community works. I want to bring your attention to our efforts to create stronger ties to the town and disappointment in those efforts. In the wake of COVID and the departure of our major tenant, we started conversations with the town about leasing the space above the main store more than 6 months ago. A representative of the town visited the space no less than 5 times. We took extensive steps to prepare the space for town needs. The board was thrilled. The staff were enthusiastic. Personally, I was really excited because I saw this as a way for the town to support not just renting space, but becoming partners with a community nonprofit in advancing our mutual values. I can speak for the board in that we were disappointed and very surprised to find out indirectly via the agenda released this weekend that the leasing space in Carmill Mall was being recommended for rental instead. We invested months of time and effort and did not actively pursue other options in favor of what we saw as a valuable relationship that would be more than a business transaction. Of course, we respect that this is a town council decision. We can pursue other tenants because we feel we have more than square footage to offer. However, we really hope that better lines of communication can be developed and that there will still be opportunities for collaboration, cooperation, and advancement of Carrboro's values moving forward. Thank you.
Very much, Maureen. Appreciate your comments. Next up on the list is Mr. Donald Hawkins from, I believe, is still the chair of our Racial Equity Commission. Is that right, Donald? Great. Come on up, sir. Welcome. Welcome back, I should say. Yeah.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I know tonight you will be talking about, I'm Donald Hawkins, here in Carrboro, 111 Jones Ferry Road, Racial Equity Board. I know tonight you'll be talking about the comprehensive implementation plan. I just want to highlight a couple concerns and barriers that we have highlighted in the affordable housing plan that we're trying to focus on.
This is the document you shared
correct,
with us.
I will say that we have passed around on your, that everybody should have. All right, so a couple points that we wanted to go over was investigate the gatekeepers regarding homelessness. I know we talked about the IFC and how last year there was a incident with the gentleman who died from the weather, so extreme conditions. So we wanted to address some of that in your plan as well. Also, responsibilities of partnership to end homelessness, the IFC again, and other agencies. So that's also highlighted in part of your 1.2A, the project, your strategy plan for 6.2, and also 6.3. Extreme weather conditions may result in injury and death, which I just also explained. Addressing accountability for agencies such as the IFC on provisions in place for extreme weather conditions as well. Organizations should be more transparent about their programs and community outreach to get people off the street and help low-income families. More accountability needed. So organizations, but people that are affiliated with deadlines, timelines, and more transparency. So just adjusting what the deadlines are, what are your expectations on that as well, and can we get that to the people as well, the transparency. Invite the county commissioners to listen to the Racial Equity Commission concerns addressing housing needs, funding, and delaying initiatives. Are there current communities at risk for being displaced due to landowners selling big contractors? For example, we talked about there was 4 mobile homes that are in jeopardy of being sold or their land is being displaced. That's in your project 3.4A and B. So we wanted to just bring that to your concern as well. Bring landlords to the table to discuss how to achieve better living conditions for tenants. Also, next point was standardized housing application. So we did look at a housing application, the recertification of that, and we wanted to address that. There were some complications with understanding that, and that was a bit confusing for people who are being introduced to new housing or trying to maintain housing. So it was a lot of gray area there. Also, we wanted to propose a bond for income much lower than 80% AMI. Proceeds of the bond are given to those with lower than 60% AMI. So a municipal bond. So that strategy was in 6.2 as well. I think I skipped a bullet. The why is the recertification of the housing application so long? Incredibly intrusive, intimidating, and restrictive. So that was that. What I was just discussed was the application was definitely a lot lengthy and wordy, and it was complicated to people who are just, like I said, just trying to get housing as well. So just wanted to address those kind of concerns. All right. And then our last little statement, the Racial Equity Commission requests that all the items above concerned during the implementation process are considered through us, so we could look at through our equity lens, and also that the racial equity lens prior to beginning projects and other strategies in the future.
Great. Thank you so much, Donald. This is really helpful, and if I'd realized ahead of time that this was about the comp plan implementation discussion, I would have invited you up later, but this is perfect because this will be helpful for us when we talk about that item coming up in a little bit.
I know we try to talk about getting on to the agenda, but I know it was
this is very helpful. So this will be a good part of that discussion, and again later in the year or in January when we actually will have a whole retreat about the comp plan implementation and talking about some of these priorities that you've raised here. So we'll refer this to the manager, and of course we'll be having a conversation about this later tonight on the agenda.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Donald.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Donald.
Okay, next on the list I have Sally Robertson. Sally, come on up. Welcome.
I'm Sally Robertson. I live at 113 Circadian Way. I'm policy coordinator at NC Warren. I wanted to say mostly yay, Carrboro, for I have heard that we're going to move ahead with several solar on several of the town buildings, and we've been working on that for a long time together, and so I'm really excited about that. I was one of about 40 Carrboro residents who sent a letter to the manager recently, just to make sure that this happens before the end of the year, because if you're not aware, there's a deadline at the end of this year to grab the Duke rebate, which pays quite a bit for tax-exempt organizations that are installing solar. They can get quite a bit back as the Duke rebate. So we wanted to make sure that that happened with as many of the town properties as possible before the end of the year. And I know some people put in some overtime probably to make that happen. I do wish that I have heard that 3 properties we're going to move forward with, and I wish that all of them could. And I just want to make sure that I understand that they have to be somewhat economical, and I just want to make sure that since we are in a climate emergency and since Carrboro has climate goals that it's trying to meet, and also since we have the Inflation Reduction Act now, which is making a lot of money available in a lot of different categories, that I just want to make sure that the town takes all of that into consideration before you decide not to move ahead with claiming the Duke rebate for certain properties. So the only thing that's urgent right now is that Duke rebate that has to be reserved before the end of the year. So any property that we even think could possibly pencil out, I would really love if we could go ahead and just claim the rebate. It doesn't mean that we have to install the solar. There's a small application fee of $3,700 per property that we would lose if we don't. But the savings that would come if we did get to install the solar would pay for whatever properties we didn't install. So I just think, just want to make sure that we take advantage of every possible thing we could take advantage of, and make sure that our number assumptions on those, the economics are accurate. And I just, again, I want to say thank you so much to everybody for moving ahead with this, because it's so important. And if Carrboro can't be a leader in this area, you know, who can? I've watched Asheville install a bunch of solar and thought, we can do better than them. So, and also there are a lot of, as I said, there's a lot of great stuff coming out of the Inflation Reduction Act. So I look forward to maybe talking with you all again next year about other energy efficiency and other solar opportunities coming out of there, because I think we can move a long way towards our goals by taking advantage of that money.
Thank you so much, Sally. And Mr. Manager, do you have anything to add? I know you've sent some information to the town council about the program and how you think it makes sense to move forward. Is there, maybe you can follow up with Sally, or if you have any comments now.
Yes, the plan would be to follow up with you. I've sent a memo to council with a request by Thursday, and once I get that response, I'll follow up with the email I received earlier last week.
Council members may have thoughts about the memo that the manager sent earlier today, I believe, so make sure to get those in. I know Sammy has already sent some comments in. Make sure to get those in to the manager before the deadline, which Sally mentioned is the big priority here. Sammy.
Yeah, well, firstly, yeah, I want to echo Sally's applauding and of staff moving forward. It sounds like we are moving forward for the 203 above there, and staff was soliciting a temperature check from the council on whether to move ahead with Public Works and the fire station. There are other two buildings that remain are the Century Center and Town Hall. I'm not sure why when we did the RFP, Town Hall wasn't included. So Mr. Manager, if you could at some point share about those questions that I made. Staff did the analysis, the cost-benefit analysis, and identified the 30-year lifespan of solar panels and the return on investment, and many of these fit within that category. And actually in the aggregate, even on top of the parking deck, it's right at the boundary at 31 years. And so I think one of the things that we also need to do as a staff, as a council, we've expressed our interest in the value, not just our fiscal responsibility, but also taking emergency climate action within the timeframe science describes to meet our goals that we've defined. And so when we do cost-benefit analysis, we need to discount this 30-year and perhaps add another 10 years to make it feasible for us to understand the cost-benefit. In this case, we're just talking about 1 year if you look at it in the aggregate. So in other words, solar on top of the parking deck makes sense, solar on top of the Century Center makes sense, and solar on top of this building makes sense. So I very much encourage staff to pursue that within this time frame. As Sally correctly points out, it's only $3,700 to reserve this rebate from Duke. Already, if we, on the two projects that we're expanding, we're saving, I believe, like $50,000. So even if we made those reservations and didn't follow through, we'll still come out on top because of the savings we will make by adding on these other two projects that staff wasn't originally considering. So I highly recommend for staff to put down the $3,700 for all of our projects, as we're already making up for it for taking on Public Works and the fire station. Now, a little concerned about us giving feedback to staff over email, and folks have an opportunity to express now. I think that's probably the best way to be transparent with the public as to where we stand, and this just feels odd that it's just a matter of giving them a heads up over email. So just wanted to say those things.
Okay. Thanks, Sammy. And I think you emailed some of these comments to the manager earlier, but make sure that he gets those from you.
Yeah, I did. Mr. Manager, you got those emails. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Sally, thanks so much. Looking forward to making this work out. Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Sally.
Sally.
All right, next on the list is Rob Crook. Rob, coming up. Welcome, Rob.
Nice to be back.
And you know the whole 3-minute thing, and you've been here before.
My name's Rob Crook, 300 Waterside Drive in Spring Valley. I guess before I start on my concerns, there was a couple things that people brought up, like the Raging Grannies. Thank you for doing the work on, nuclear proliferation and trying to eliminate nuclear weapons. I've got a buddy fighting on the front lines of Ukraine. So, when I hear Russian propaganda and Putin talking about use of tactical nuclear weapons, it kind of hits home for me. And God knows what's going to happen even if Putin is eliminated and, somebody even crazier takes his place. So I guess the other part is, moving on from that cheery subject, is the solar program. One of the things that and it's kind of weird bringing this up, but do they also not choose your solar installer for you and take the work away from you for having to decide a contractor? Like, I'm going to get a contractor now. Who do I select? They take the bids and do the legwork for you. Is that correct? Yeah. So
Partnering with Yes Solar.
Yeah, so that makes the construction process a lot easier. And this was not a paid-for ad. No, but it is. It's a good thing. What I wanted to say was thanks for considering the bike path from the high school area and the school area of the middle school, elementary school, out to Sewell School Road. I know that's kind of coming up. I think that's great. One of the other points I wanted to bring up and maybe expand your view on things is the possibility of utilizing, with those connections, utilizing the railroad and the rails to trail, which I know is in the Carrboro bike plan, but utilizing that railroad easement to get out to Durham, to get out to other destinations. And in so doing, we could really, really create a regional non-motorized bike transportation system. With those 12 miles of rails to trail, getting out towards Durham, there's a possibility that you could actually connect Carrboro, UNC, Chapel Hill with Hillsborough, Durham, but you're also connecting UNC and Duke campuses with a non-motorized pathway. But you're also allowing us, when you look at a map and sit down, I could ride my bike with a total of about 2 miles, 3 miles on paved road all the way out to RDU and actually hook up to the Wake County shared use paths. And Wake County is way ahead of everybody else in terms of the construction of shared use paths. They've got about 120 miles or so, I think, right now, and they're planning on putting in another over 100 miles in the near future. So with just 12 miles built at that cost, you're leveraging that and getting, literally hundreds of miles of bike trails, that you could use at your disposal and move anywhere you wanted to in the triangle. So that's it. I think it would help a lot, and thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Rob. Thanks very much, Mr. Manager. You've received those comments and certainly respecting portions of the bike plan and so on, and would love to get a hold of that rail corridor someday. It'll happen. It's going to happen. All right. Thanks to everyone being here tonight. We're going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mayor. The first item on the consent agenda is the approval of the January 2023 Town Council meeting schedule. First agenda item is for the Town Council to approve the January 2023 Town Council meeting schedule. The next item is a request to authorize the town manager to execute a supplemental agreement with NCDOT for the Homestead Road Chapel High School multi-use path. First agenda item is for the Town Council to consider authorizing the town manager to execute the supplemental agreement to extend the project milestones. The next item is a request to authorize the town manager to execute a supplemental agreement with NCDOT for the Morgan Creek Greenway. And this agenda item is to authorize the town manager to execute the supplemental agreement to extend the project milestones. The next item is a request to authorize the town manager to execute a supplemental agreement with NCDOT to extend project milestones for the bike loop detector project and to allocate local discretionary funds to increase the project budget. The purpose of this item is for the town council to authorize the town manager to execute the agreement and to authorize staff to request transportation funds to cover additional estimated expenses to allow the project to move forward. And the final item is a request to authorize the town manager to sign the Carrboro office space lease. The purpose of this agenda item is to authorize the town manager to sign a 3-year office lease agreement with Carmill Mall Limited Partnership.
Right, thank you, Mr. Manager. We have a consent agenda before us. Barbara?
Mayor, I would like to pull 5, request to authorize the town manager to sign Carmill office space lease, but move 1 through 4.
Randy?
Yeah, I'd like to pull 2. I have a quick question.
Amend your motion to approve 1, 3, and 4, Barbara.
Is that what it is? 1, 3, and 4.
For a second by Susan, moved by Barbara, seconded by Susan, that we approve items 1, 3, and 4 on the consent agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Matter passes unanimously. Okay. Barbara, let's go to you first.
So I'm just going to say that I had a conversation with Barbara Jessie Black yesterday, who's sitting in the back. We all know her. She's executive director of Community Works and one of our strong community partners. And I have to be honest, I was pretty hurt and angered by this very intimate information that she shared with me, the way she exposed herself and was just telling me about her experience. I want to suggest to my colleagues to take the time to reach out to her whenever you get a chance. This is not the time to sit in silence around this issue. And just if I've lost anybody, I'm still talking about the Carmill Mall space lease. So for me, I see another missed opportunity to support a BIPOC woman-run business, potentially. We as a town talk about race equity and supporting our BIPOC business community quite a bit. We mention race equity and being more supportive and resourceful when it comes to the BIPOC business community on paper and in conversation. But we fail when it comes time to put these words into action. We fall by the wayside. We don't walk the talk, and here we are again stumbling through yet another situation like we did with present-day Almaine. I realize that we need to be good stewards of the town's resources, but we also need to learn to walk and chew gum at the same time. I believe that if the dots had been connected appropriately, we might have a different outcome here tonight. I'm sorry, Barb. An outcome that would be more inclusive than exclusive and uphold the values that we say we hold dear in this community. Creativity is a thing, and there is nothing written that we have to do the same thing the same way all the time. Barbara Jessie Black mentioned the words gatekeeping and feeling shut out during this process. We must stop using process, practice, money, or anything else that will continue to deny access to any governmental process. Unbelievable. Since the town of Carrboro has a Black Lives Matter mural on the side of the Community Works building. Unbelievable. I am asking that we work harder, be more willing to walk into the truths that we talk about. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it, and it will help bring increased credibility to the Black and brown communities that have been underserved and underrepresented for way too long. I don't know how I feel about voting tonight. I do support, this needed space for our staff. It's so very taxing every time I have to show up in this way for this work that we all say we want done. I mean, I'm in it. Make no mistake about it. I'm gonna keep pushing it, hopefully not pushing alone, right? So all this to say that I really would like for us to kind of reevaluate this whole situation about who's gonna have the lease for town space. And this here, what I just said, is about more than that. It's about our work overall, as a council, staff, and as a community. So I just kind of wanted to start out with that. I'm still a little shaky, about my conversation with Barbara, but it did help to shed some light on this situation. So, I just want us to have more of a discussion about it. I know the information that Mr. White shared with us, but certainly there's more to it than that. Thanks.
Barbara? I have Eleazar and then Susan.
Yes, thank you, Barbara, for pulling this. I was also going to pull this item. And Mr. White, thank you for the responses that you gave me over the questions that I have. But similar to, my apologies, Councilwoman Fushi, I rather us use or find a way that we can support a local nonprofit who has been a staple of this community since before I was even born. Yeah, I based on the emails that I've received, of course, the conversation we had or the email correspondence we've had, as far as I understand, there's a proposal for 3,204 feet, but I assume, and I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but I assume there's a way to come to a consensus around the actual size that we need. And I imagine when if we were to have the conversation instead of the 3,000 doing something that's more reasonable for the needs of the town, I assume that price would come significantly down, knowing that the 1,500 square feet is less than half of, I'm talking not about the Carmel proposal, is less than half than that initial, or the figures I have for Community Works. And all this to say, I'm also, and I guess this is also for everyone to know where I stand. I much rather, in any situation, support BIPOC businesses and nonprofits who are doing the hard work in our community. And I get it. We need to be good stewards, and I totally understand that part. I just still have questions and feel like we could do some additional work to get to a good place where it fits the town budget, it fits the need for the staff, and it fits the needs of the Community Works or yeah, and if we were to go to a vote, I would vote no on this tonight.
Thanks, Eleazar. Susan?
Yeah, thank you. First, thank you, Barbara Eleazar, for those comments. And I also want to just thank Community Works for all of the great work that you do in our community, building partnerships, paying living wages, providing so many good services that so many folks here benefit from. So thank you very much. Mr. Manager, talk us through just a little bit. I know that where the town is just, we're bursting at the seams, and we needed some additional space to lease. And I know that you reached out to Carmel Mall and also reached out to Community Works to get a little bit of information in terms of their spacing that's available, their pricing. Talk us through a little bit the process that you went through in terms of coming up with the decision that Carmel Mall would be the better decision.
So at the time we reached out to Community Works, that was the only space I was aware of in town that was available to lease space. That's why we started there. And so it did take us some time to understand the space, our needs, to understand our IT needs, connecting to the building, to our network, and also trying to figure out what the upfit and furnishing costs might be. So that's where we started. Once we got the numbers back and we saw how much this would be for the town, we then became aware of space at Carmel Mall and reached out to them as well to understand their space was a smaller space. But if you visit Community Works upstairs, the area that we were looking at leasing is an open suite area. And so the proposal we got back from Community Works was to lease the space that would be 3,200 square feet. And in there, it's set up as cubicles. And so we have to build up walls because our departments that work there would need some sense of privacy to work there. And so that's what you see in terms of the upfit and furnishing costs in terms of building those walls and providing the furnishings. We did ask Community Works to consider a different pricing structure. We understand it was Class A space for them. And they did come back and offer us $25 per square foot and a $10,000 build-out credit. And so we just looked at the numbers and tried to figure out what would be in the best interest of the town in terms of the cost of this. But either space would work for the staff, and so either one could work. It's just that the Community Works is a larger space, and as we understand, we couldn't divide it up in any way. And we also understand that they were trying to figure out how to carve up the space in a way that other tenants could be on the same floor as well. So that's how we ended up on the side with the 3,200 square feet.
Thank you for that. And just so I'm clear, there's been a little bit of confusion. Are we comparing apples to apples? It sounds like from your email today that Carmel Mall is including utilities, taxes in the numbers that they're providing in terms of the estimated cost per month.
Yes, we're required to carry insurance no matter where we land outside of town hall.
Okay. And then another question, Mr. Manager, is I read in your email just how much we are bursting at the seams. I know Mary is in the basement. I know that our communication and engagement staff is sharing space rather than having their own offices. Planning is trying to make the best out of a very, very cramped quarters. Anita, I believe, is in Century Center. So we're bursting at the seams. I asked that question because this would be a 3-year lease with Community Works. And so given it's 3 years and given that just the nature of any organization, we grow over time, would it make sense? I mean, let me rephrase that. Had you considered that the larger space, even though it's more than we would need right now, maybe it would be good to consider this over the long term so that the town will have that little bit of extra capacity to grow into?
I'm not sure if you mean extra capacity in the Community Works building?
In other words, even though Community Works may be a little bit more space than we actually need right now, if we're looking at a 3-year lease, would it make sense to have that little bit of, have that extra space so that we would have room to grow into?
So the ultimate goal is to look at renovating our own facilities here in Town Hall, the Century Center, and Public Works as well. So that's why we're looking for the temporary space. But the goal is to get this building renovated so that all employees, we can fit them here on our own property is the goal. But at this point, we're open to any option. Again, we're just trying to find a space for our new employees to work. And so we're open to that as well. We thought that the solution we provided would be the one that would meet our needs, but we're certainly open to other conversation.
And if I could just confirm then that if the lease with Carmill is $74,000, the lease with Community Works would be about double that, the 154. Are those the correct numbers, I was a little confused. Is the Community Works number actually lower than that once you get down to the 25 square foot and the $10,000 build-out credit? In other words, is the $154,000, can that be reduced by those additional things that Community Works has offered to throw in for us?
So the base cost is the first line, the actual lease line item. So that number would be $84,906 per year at Community Works. The lease at Carmel Mall would be $34,500. The lines below that would be additional costs the town would incur for IT upfit to connect to our network, and then we would have to do some upfit of either of both spaces. But Carmel Mall is pretty much ready to go. It wouldn't require the kind of a construction we'd have to do at Community Works. So that's the next line you see there. And for Community Works, there are two options. Option one is to go with building the walls. I mentioned this, the ceiling to floor walls to provide an office space, actual office space rather than cubicles. Option two would pretty much leave the cubicles in place. But again, that doesn't provide an optimal work environment for our department because these are department heads who be doing confidential matters. And the way it's designed now, it's open space. And so we would need to put those walls in so they could have some privacy while they do their work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. That information is really helpful. Mr. Manager, I was a little concerned this evening about the comment Dr. Bernier made that Community Works found out that they would not be awarded the lease through our agenda when it became public on Friday. And could you share just a little bit of information on that?
So I called Miss Jessie Black the week of November 15th to let her know what direction I was heading in. And then we also met on November 22nd, I believe. So I'm not certain how the communication flowed within Community Works, but I did call the week of November 15th.
And during that conversation on the 15th, was she aware that we were going to be awarding the lease to Carmel Mall, or?
Yes, that was the reason for the call.
I got you. Okay, thank you very much for this information. And I do want to, I'm not sure, personally, I feel ready to vote this evening, but I do want to say that I think that I agree so much with what Council Member Fushi said, is that we do a lot of talking about how much we prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is our opportunity, even though it would cost a little bit more. This is our an opportunity to align our values with our dollars. And so I would be, at this point, in favor of supporting a lease with Community Works. Thank you.
Council members want to speak. Sammy?
Sure. Yeah, I just want to express gratitude for the issues raised by all of my colleagues so far. You know, as I read the memo, I feel like part of the issue is it seems like the leasing of Community Works is not, that has to be at 3,200 square feet. And is that correct, my understanding, or is there any way in which we could actually reduce the amount at Community Works so it's more aligned with what the actual need from town is? Because it seems like what we actually need is 1,500 square feet.
But that's the challenge of the space. I mean, I'm certainly willing to work with Community Works to figure it out, but the space itself, and that's why I went there 5 times trying to figure out how we make this work.
Right, so you all
Big
have already
open
done
space,
that.
so yeah, we're trying to figure out, but there's no other way we could see to carve that up, and they were willing to carve up as well, because again, they wanted the remaining space available for an additional tenant.
Yeah, thanks. So, I mean, for me, I think generally just with bids, it was within a certain percentage. Do you know off the top of your head, maybe it's an attorney question, what that percentage is that by law? I know this maybe doesn't fall in the category, but it's a good guideline to understand kind of the range of where we are able to have that kind of discretion before it goes into like a favoritism realm. Do you know what that is, Brady?
I think when it comes, and this is more with like services, like repairs and that type of thing, I think it's 30,000. Where isn't it a percentage, or is it? That's the threshold by when it starts becoming an issue. Type of bidding, and then from there, there's a certain range for informal bidding, and then if you go over a very large amount, like I think it's like 300,000, then you start going into another category.
What's the percentage over which the lowest bid can go before it triggers? Isn't there a range, as I understand?
Yeah, there's an upset bid percentage. I want to say it's like 5%.
5%.
Something like that. And I don't want to misspeak, but that's
right. So, I mean, for me, the issue here is this range is very large. We're talking about, for the lease, more than double. So for option 1 or option 2 for Community Works, the lease is 84, and then for Carmel it's 34,000. So it's more than double. Then the upfit, it's 5 times if we're talking about full walls for Community Works, and double if we're talking about just regular walls. So using that as like a standard of what is a normal range of going outside of the bounds. It's definitely more than 5. I mean, it's 10 times 5%. So I'm all for, supporting community works, but I would hope that we could find, and it sounds like staff's already done this legwork, a way in which we don't have to lease twice as much space as we actually need. And, or maybe there's, to what Barbara was speaking of, a creative way to think about this, where we do lease the full amount, but we sublease the amount that we don't need, so that we're making back the money that we would that we'd be losing. And I don't know, maybe that's a question for our economic development department. I don't know what the market's like in terms of like the likelihood of us finding a sublease tenant and making our money back. But that's what I hear when I hear about creativity and trying to address this. And so maybe we should postpone this decision tonight, and in the hopes that that idea or any others that we might come up with tonight could be looked at as an alternative for how to get there. And that still would mean the town would be putting up a lot more money, because we're talking about the upfit and furnishings, which is 5 times at Community Works at $133,000. And at Carmel is $27,000. So, but to do both lease and upfits, it's a lot of money. We're talking about $240,000 versus $74,000. And so in balancing, all our values, which is one of them is fiscal, I think it's really hard for me to make that decision to go with Community Works at this time.
Oh, go
Thank
ahead.
you, Sammy. We'll go to Danny next, and then Randy.
Thanks. I am a little bit reticent here to add too much comment, but I do think that this identifies a couple tensions as a council that we have some opportunities to improve on. So I just wanted to flag that. And I think before I do that, I would like to, insofar as it's reasonable, delay our decision on this tonight. I recognize the burden that we place on staff. I don't know that it is always clear when it is subject to sort of council discretionary review. I mean, this is an issue where I would really like to believe that we trust our staff to execute a lease and to be able to be empowered. But the issues that we're hearing about tonight are really serious. One thing that I am not in love with is the serious process concerns have been communicated to some members of the council that some other members of the council are finding out about during public session. And I would like the opportunity to address those and get to the bottom of them. And I want to take those really seriously. And then, secondly, the idea of getting creative here is one that I'm very supportive of. But I'm not sure that we have a consistent parameter as a board for when these decisions, when we want to oversee this creativity. And so this is really to us. I think this is a serious enough issue that I would be in favor of delaying this and putting more work on staff to get to the bottom of this issue, in particular because of the seriousness of what we're hearing about. But I also think that we need to take really seriously on this board up here the opportunities that we have to not be putting our staff in this position, going forward, and to have a stronger sense of, what creativity looks like from our working, and when we expect that creativity to be applied, what they can expect in terms of support from us. This is really delicate, and I don't relish lending my voice here on staff to be, beholden to our decisions. And so, I want to say we have a couple of retreats coming up on council, and I think that we should really keep this situation in the front of our minds, to really articulate how it is that we can split this up right a little bit better. And so, with that little soapboxing done, I would like to recommend that we table this until the new year. That's a motion, I suppose. Yeah.
Motion by Danny and a second by Eleazar to postpone making a decision on this matter, Mr. Manager, can I just paraphrase, until you've had an opportunity to consider some of the comments that you've heard from council members tonight, and maybe see if there are other options available to inform the decision. Is that a fair assessment of the motion, Eleazar? Randy, you had your hand raised as well. It's your turn.
And thank you, Danny, for making that motion, and thank you for each of my fellow members who've spoken. I do think this is a good example of of how does our money follow our values. It's one of those very sensitive situations where it didn't unfold the way we wanted to. I want to thank staff and the manager for the communication we did receive and the information that was presented to us in the chart last week. I think it makes absolute sense to have more conversation and possibly further negotiation. How creative we could be, I don't know, but I think through conversation with Community Works, there may be more negotiation space than we now see. It is temporary, and that's important for us to remember when we think about justifying the cost. So I appreciate Sammy's assessment of the costs. If there was miscommunication, I just publicly want to apologize for any miscommunication that may have occurred. I know these things can happen, and often does. What I would like to ask the manager is how a delay affects, because this is our last meeting, how does a delay affect moving on?
Yeah, I'd asked that earlier. I didn't get a response.
Yes, there's time to have further conversation. We're just beginning the process of advertising for the new positions. As you mentioned earlier, we got employees working in sharing offices now. So since we could get this resolved, it'd be helpful to provide the appropriate space for our staff.
Yeah, and I a little further in our conversation tonight, we're going to be talking about the comprehensive plan. I just want to keep very real in my mind, the difference between it costing twice as much and where we want money to go. I think we've got to be very sensitive to that. But like I said, I have full faith in the fact that with further conversation, we may be able to find something that works, or find some way that through economic development, there's additional leasing of space. It is my hope that we can come to some meeting of the minds, but I do really appreciate things that were said by the council that reflect some, true mindfulness. So thank you.
Thanks, Barbara. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. And so just to be a little bit clearer, I just talked to Barbara Jesse last night, and I feel like her reaching out to me is no different than other constituents that may reach out to you guys and not reach out to me. And this is why I encouraged you to reach out and have the conversation with her. I didn't have to reveal that I had talked to her. I'm being very transparent here. Very transparent. And so when I think about Community Works and Youth Works, and I think about Carmel Mall and the properties that Mr. Millian manages, that's not apples to apples. You're talking about this nonprofit over here that works deeply within the community versus property management group. And so when I look at that, I'm saying, well, the property management group has multiple properties that they're getting income from. They're just larger. That's what they do, right? And then you have the nonprofit who's kind of doing the best they can. They're a nonprofit. So to me, it's not exactly apples to apples, because resources and the financial template and all that is built on, it's just different, for both of them. And so I just wanted to kind of point that out. I appreciate everything everybody's said tonight. It really has added to this discussion. Thanks. Thank you,
Barbara. All right, thanks for council members' comments. I'll just appreciate the managers being willing to take this back on again and do a little more digging on it, and apologize for sounds like there's a lot of multiple communications going on here, and maybe we just need to figure out a process for this. One thing I would like to note about process, having said all that, and notwithstanding the comments council members have made, is that this is the kind of item that normally would not even come to the council, right? So this is typically an operational matter, right? Signing a lease for space. It's only by virtue of the fact that this particular item, because it's a 3-year lease, exceeds the threshold by which the manager is allowed on his own to be authorized to execute a contract or a lease, that it's even coming to us. So I think just thinking about that process issue and how that informs the way that we think about what our role is versus what the manager's role is in performing these operational responsibilities is important as well. I'm very appreciative, and I'm glad that Barbara Jessie Black is here with us tonight to lend her voice by being in the room. I think whatever the manager is able to come up with over the next month or so, I'll be certainly excited to hear about. I do want us to be very realistic, though, about the numbers that we are looking at, right? It's not simply double the cost, triple the cost. It's more than triple the cost. So it's, let's be creative and whatever it is the manager thinks he can do with that. But I mean, it's an interesting set of trade-offs to be making when we're talking about values, all of the multiple values we're dealing with here, including our fiduciary responsibility to the town. So I just want to be really clear about that and encourage fruitful conversations with our community partners about that. And having said that, I'll put the motion to a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. The matter passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Manager. And thank you, Community Works, for being out here tonight. Thanks, Maureen. All right. We had another item on the consent agenda pulled, I have to say. That is item number 2. Thanks. And that was Randy. Randy, go ahead.
Yeah, so, well, first of all, I want to thank staff for their work to bring this forth. My question regarding the Homestead Road multi-use path has to do with the, and I understand that it's an extended project milestone. I want to be clear to understand the punch list since no specifics were given. So I'd like to ask staff if they could share what is exactly left that needs to be completed on the initial project punch list.
Mr.
Yes,
Manager, do you have information about that?
Yes, I asked Churchman Grove Planning Director to come forward to share some additional information.
Sure. So the items about the municipal agreement to extend this project schedule. We have been working on getting the municipal agreement updated for over a year, maybe a year and a half, and of many things that with the DOT's administration resulted in some delays in them processing things like this. So, but in any case, this is an important thing for us to get the project schedule incorporated into our agreement with them. The punch list includes adding some replanting some of the plants in the stormwater wetland. It includes putting replacement of some thermoplastic for the delineation between the 2 lanes of the path. It includes adding some drains or drains to the end vents under the bridge where there's some seepage. So we want to make sure that structure drains properly. And I think there's one other place where the inspection of the property with one of the staff from the state stormwater division, DEQ, identified the need to do some grading because there was some channelization where the sheet flow was leaving the path. I think that's pretty much it. So those are the things that are included.
Yeah. May I ask, Mr. Manager, if these 5 or 6 items could be delineated and put on the website so that community can see exactly what remains? Because I don't know that folks are aware of what the work that's very specific to this project that's incomplete. And I also want to tie this to something Rob said that I think is really important that needs clarification. That is that there was the expectation and the hope that by this point, there would be some movement towards creating the spur between the 1B Greenway, multi-use path Greenway, and Smith School going out to Sewell School Road. You know, that I think it's an informal path at this point. So if we could get some clarification on that, because I sense that many folks in the community are expecting that that is the next step in this project for completion to from Homestead to Sewell School Road.
Thank you, Randy. So so we have these project updates, and so I guess Randy is requesting that could that list of items remaining on the punch list be simply listed on that project update status on the webpage? Is that so that people understand what's involved in this remaining to be completed steps of the project?
Sure, yes.
If I understand it correctly, the punch list is basically stuff that needs to be finished up by the contractor,
Yes.
so that we can sign it and say the project's done.
Yeah, not the contractor, because we had a mediated settlement with them, but
Got it. Well, with whoever's completing the project.
yes.
Right? Okay, that's very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it does not include that piece because that's in Chapel Hill, but we'll check with them about the status of the connection beyond out to Sewell. So we can link up if there's any movement there.
Thanks very much, Trish. Thanks, Mr. Manager. Randy, would you like to move the item?
I would. I'll move item 2 for the multi-use path from Homestead Road to Chapel Hill High.
And seconded by Susan. Moved by Randy, seconded by Susan to approve item number 2 on the consent agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Matter passes unanimously. Thank you, Trish.
You bet. You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Manager, on to other matters, please.
Thank you, Mayor. The item under other matters is a comprehensive plan implementation status report. The purpose of the agenda item is to provide the town council with an update on the status of recently adopted Carrboro Connects Comprehensive Plan 2022 to 2042. And Trish McGar will make the presentation.
Stayed here.
Welcome back, Trish.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Nice to be here. Thanks. Well, I'm so happy to join you this evening and provide you an update on the Carrboro Connects Town of Carrboro 2022-2042 Comprehensive Plan. And adoption, as we all know, remember, I think, the adoption of the plan is a pretty big deal and certainly resulted from a tremendous amount of leadership on the part of the town council and extensive participation and commitment from members of our community. So just nice to take a moment and reflect on that and appreciate it. We are just a day away from being at the 6-month mark since adoption, which is kind of astonishing, but you know, time moves on. You know, all that the plan entails, its vision and expectations. There's a lot to do, and we have been working hard to establish a good foundation and look forward to the months and years ahead in bringing the vision of the plan to fruition. I am here tonight on behalf of our manager and department heads and many staff who are working to line up their work plans and tasks, et cetera, with the plan itself. And I would like to make a special note of 2 planning staff members who are both relatively new to us, one especially new, but have been working really hard side by side with me on setting in place the framework for plan implementation, and that's Ben Berolsheimer, who worked with us on development of the plan itself, and also Duncan Dodson, and they're here in the audience tonight, as well as many other folks, as I mentioned, department heads, the manager, our Chief Race and Equity Officer among them. So let's jump in. I do, just as a plan of action for tonight, wanted to run through a couple of things to ground us all in the plan itself. So my plan of action for my objectives for speaking to you this evening are to run through, first of all, a refresher, what's in the plan, provide an overview briefly of the implementation plan itself, which is Chapter 11 in the plan, provide a status of action on the priority projects, and then what to expect in fiscal year 23 and 24, and then what's next. That sounds okay. Okay, thanks. So the plan, as we remember, was adopted on June 7th, 2022. It does have 11 chapters and appendices. Basically, the first 2 chapters are sort of the backdrop of the plan, the introduction, the history of the town, information about our planning, our commitments to specifically the 2 underpinnings of this plan, race and equity and climate action, and then information on the plan process and our community engagement, the steps we took, and what we yielded from those steps. There are 7 elements, specific chapters on topics, planning topics, or topical areas where we did dig deeply into goals and vision statements, goals, strategies, etc. Then we have a public services and communications chapter that we included. This is kind of an unusual thing to include in a comprehensive plan, but it really is the backdrop of all of the town's functions. So it includes departments that are captured in some of those other plan elements, but it also includes ones that are not, like our finance department and our human resources department, police department, and fire. And those areas, those service areas, if you will, are captured every year in the annual budgeting process. And in that process every year, we lay out specific objectives. Some of those are about the way we do our work, and some of them are about specific types of work. So there's a lot of other projects. My point here is just that there are other projects that are entailed in the annual budgeting process. And ultimately, these projects from the comp plan are going to fold into that process too. And then we have an implementation chapter. So we did include an extensive chapter on all of the goals and strategies and projects that were identified in the planning process, and a framework for implementing them. There's a glossary and a list of participants included as well. So a couple of takeaways about this sort of part of the plan in the introduction. Just want to emphasize we did try hard to use a systems approach, really understand the integration or interrelatedness of activities where we cross departmental lines or other lines in order to achieve interests that were expressed by the community. These projects and strategies ultimately were organized back into those plan elements, but then the need to perhaps set a lead for a project in planning instead of economic development or instead of transportation or something like that was spelled out in that Chapter 11. Finally, one of the things that you did as part of the plan was readoption of some other recently adopted plans, like the Community Climate Action Plan, the Bike Plan, Downtown Parking Plan. So Chapter 11 has 2 parts, and it basically includes what are priority projects as well as the implementation table that includes all the projects that were identified in the plan. The priority projects were those that were selected. So from the 7 chapter elements, there are 5 priority projects identified for each, resulting in 35 projects. There are a number of other projects in the plan. But these were identified through an evaluation process with the task force based on community input, and the task force evaluating several questions about how the plans advance those underpinnings, the projects advance those underpinnings of race and equity and climate action, how they might really be cross-cutting and advance the overall interests of the town, benefit the community, and so on. So those were how those 35 projects were selected. This part of the plan also includes information on the update process and what our expectations are about how it's going to be implemented, again, through the annual budgeting process, and then what our expectations are about updating the plan. So we have 35 priority projects, and these are just the pages. There are 14 of them from the plan where those are laid out, 2 pages for each. We got 314 projects in total in the rest of the implementation table. And you can see here how they're broken down, those total number of projects to get that 314. Just kind of it's just a snapshot, just what the plan looks like. So you don't have to go count them yourselves, but you may have already. So what's our status look like on the current priority projects, those 35 projects? Again, here's that image of what those pages look like. So, and you'll recall that these pages, so there's 2 for each, they're color-coded. It starts with affordable housing, ends with land use. And they basically represent that 5-year schedule. So it's a vertical schedule here, but it runs through and shows you how we're trying to get from the beginning, the articulation of this strategy or project, and get to an end product or an outcome. We took those pages and turn them into this table, which we did include in your packets. And it's really our attempt to, at a glance, give you a way, and us a way of checking in on what does implementation of this plan look like as we move forward. So what we've tried to show here, we've given the projects. You'll probably have noted that some of the things that were identified in those priority projects were actually at the strategy level. So we've given them a short title in this table, so we can kind of have a short way of explaining what we think we're going to be doing. We also added an expected outcome here, so we'll all have common understanding of what it is we're working towards as we get through these steps. One of the things we tried to do here is represent that 2-page, 5-year kind of schedule for implementation and sort of see its progression in some categories. So we created some categories for reporting on the status of these projects, and they are, the project hasn't started yet, it's in a planning stage, it's in an analysis stage, it's in implementation, or it's complete. None of the projects are complete yet, but you probably already knew that. And most of them are started, many of them are in the planning stage. We do have a few that have not yet begun. We haven't started working on them yet. Just a summary of what the status looks like to make it easier to see than that big table. So that's what our summary looks like. And then just to kind of give you that same look at that chapter 10, the Public Services and Communications chapter, did a similar thing where we went through and communicated with each department to sort of track those projects that had timelines associated with them or were expressed in the annual budget. So just to give you a similar thing, we've got many projects that are continuous types of activities that are underway. So you can see those happening. And this is all sort of the backdrop of how the plan will be integrated as we go forward. And then we've got projects that are in planning or analysis. The completed project up there is the comp and classification study that you approved earlier this year. Some takeaways. So this is an at-a-glance tool to understand the overview and the progression of these projects. We will be updating this as part of our reporting and also looking at other ways to kind of provide a simple way to track the projects, the progress on these projects, and not always in that one big view, but in broken out views, so people can hone in on a project of interest. What we're sharing right now is based on what's in the plan, as of adoption and where we are today. So where staff are in working on these projects. Just want to point out that the projects that are listed here are all equal priority, basically. There is no scoring or prioritization within the plan itself. So I know that's one of the conversations that you've been having, and we'll probably be having some more. But we've been looking at them that way. Work is underway on these projects. Most are in the planning phase at this point. We are working to incorporate our racial equity assessments into each project as we go forward. Some of that will be sort of under a practice policy or procedure that we've already identified. Otherwise, it will be a standalone analysis. The implementation of this, of course, is alongside those public services functions and services that we provide that are in Chapter 10. This is a broad brush, and there are many milestones to come. And so when you look at that column with the 5 years, it's really a snapshot and a very truncated illustration of what will be many, many steps. What to expect in the upcoming fiscal years. So our evaluation of the projects that we have and where they are and where we expect them to be in the remaining quarters of this fiscal year and the fiscal year coming up, 24, is sort of summarized here. I'll highlight a couple of things. With the ARPA funding, you're going to be hearing about specifically, I'm just going to go down sort of alphabetically. You're going to be hearing about weatherization programs and I think some evaluation from affordable housing, some additional work. You may hear this through the Housing and Community Department's work with their advisory board, but about empowering community members to become homeowners. So my blanket there is about reports that may come to you, budget requests that may come to you, or things that may be interactions that may be occurring with our advisory boards as well. We're going to be working to update the WISE program and the Energy Efficiency Revolving Loan Fund. We've had that on our list of things to do for a while, but we expect to be able to bring that forward to you in this fiscal year so you can see an updated version of that. Expect that we'll be bringing you a text amendment about the parking reductions that's under the transportation and mobility element. Stormwater is developing, is getting close to having a good version of their stormwater playbook for retrofits. So I think you'll be seeing that, perhaps again through the Stormwater Advisory Commission, but it will be a product that we think will be coming forward. A number of things, initiatives with economic sustainability, either to you within a budget request or with the either the Tourism Development Association Advisory. I'm sorry, forgetting the last word. Sean's not here though. So authority, Tourism Development Authority, or the Economic Sustainability Commission. Recreation Center. Rec and Parks is expecting that they'll be making a budget request to help with a feasibility study for this recreation center item that's included in their element of the plan. They're also working on a number of things related to the murals, and both with the Arts Commission and the Rec and Parks Commission, looking at park locations where additional art opportunities are possible, and then some art installations with some of the ARPA funding that looks like will be available for that. Under planning, the land use area, we will be scoping and hopefully working to begin the procurement process. If, again, some of this is going to be a budget request as well as analysis, but bringing that forward at the end of 23 into fiscal year 24. Some analysis of the density and transit corridor, so probably reports to you on that, and on the commercial and mixed use rezoning opportunities as we more clearly frame those projects and the prioritization of areas that we'll be studying. So we think those will be the things that you'll be seeing in the next, year and a half or so. What's next? Just want to note a couple of things. The plan has gotten some recognition from the North Carolina City and County Communicators, an Excellence in Communications Award for citizen participation. And then we also did receive the Marvin Collins Award from the state chapter of the American Planning Association, so the North Carolina chapter. That award was for comprehensive planning for a small community. We are going to be sending out task force certificates of appreciation. You just have to get some signatures and then get those off as Christmas gifts. And then we're working on the executive summary, which will be our plan, and contract with TESCA has us preparing that in both English and Spanish language versions. So it looks like it's going to be about 16 pages and summarize each of the plan's chapters and really highlight implementation as a short guide to the whole plan, which I didn't mention, but our baby is 235 pages long, so rather a big one. Finally, your retreat in January is going to provide an opportunity to dig more deeply into this whole question of the plan priorities and implementation. So very much looking forward to that and how that informs and directs the budget preparation for fiscal year 24. And then we will be looking forward to an annual report, thinking about that for June of next year. So happy to try and answer any questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Trish. And thank you, Mr. Manager, for all the staff who have been working hard to get us to this point. A lot that goes on in these things that we discover. We don't realize how much work is having to go into just sort of preparing the ground for all the work to come. But this is nice to see in this form, and I'd wonder if we can get a copy of the slides either to council directly or put up on the agenda website just as a reference. Trish, one thing that I took note of in particular was your comment that right now the way that staff is approaching this process is by not establishing priorities. Essentially, the priority, you have the implementation schedule that's been laid out in broad strokes in the plan itself, but everything is individual task is seen as of equal priority. So is your idea that at the January strategic planning retreat, that's an opportunity for us to weigh in, probably more than weigh in, on what prioritization should look like?
I think so. And I mean, it's very clear if you look at the list of projects that where we have the cross-cutting themes, some of them have more circles in them than others. So, but then there are different, you know, they're in very different elements of the plan. So, and that's really why overall the plan was not adopted with prioritization beyond those top 35. So I think that your further consideration of this question, I think, will be very helpful in determining if there is something that you need us to, you know, to elevate, or as opposed to something else beyond
One of the
what's
things
there
that,
now.
as you mentioned, is laid out in the implementation chapter of the plan is that kind of vertical schedule within each of the theme areas. And it, you know, by virtue of it being a sort of timeline, it does seem to suggest priorities, at least in terms of what comes first, what comes second in each of those areas. Is that informing the way that you approach how you tackle each of these or projects, or?
Yeah,
Does my
I
question
mean,
make sense? I mean, you know, there is some priority in the sense that it is laid out in a chronological order for some of these particular projects.
yeah, absolutely. There's a little bit of room for interpretation there, but to a large degree, most of the projects start in the first fiscal year and try to end in the fifth fiscal year. There's interrelationships, though, and so one of the things we're doing is kind of working to create teams so that where we have, you know, the downtown master plan, for example, obviously is a project that economic sustainability and planning, very likely, you know, race and equity, housing, are also going to be, public works possibly, are going to be very heavily involved in that conversation about that, scoping that project. So I guess what my point, I'm sorry, this is not a very direct answer, but what I'm trying to say is that some of the projects are very much within a department. And so those projects within that department are their priorities, I believe. Where there's mixed, and there's about 17 or 14 projects that have multiple leads. I think in the where we have the multiple leads, you know, projects, there's some prioritization that we might want to try and work through, because, well, it's partly how many people we have to do the work and how we're going to you know, obtain or reassign resources to be able to do all of these things if we actually want to stay on a timeline like is laid out there.
You had one slide that showed some specific tasks that you plan to have completed. It looks like some of them by the end of this fiscal year 23, and then going into the first part of the next fiscal year. Some of those I was very glad to see on that list. I'm wondering if your timeline for those that you've highlighted for us tonight includes what we know. I'm thinking of changes that will involve amendments to the land use ordinance, for example. And so we know that there's a statutorily required process that those have to go through in terms of review by advisory boards, coming to the council, setting public hearings, all of that. Is your timeline for completing some of those tasks, including consideration of those statutorily required review processes?
Well, I would say that what I've tried to describe are not necessarily completion of them, but what you would see in relation to them by the, so for example, I think I'm imagining that we will have a draft ordinance to show you by the end of the fiscal year, which would then mean that the public hearing for it might be early in the next fiscal year.
That would be the opportunity to schedule the public hearing.
Exactly, yes. And yes. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, I just wondered to what extent that timeline was included here, or I'm thinking of completion. You're thinking of, you know, introduction, essentially.
I am thinking about different products, yeah, and kind of bundling them together in that.
And so,
described it.
Getting back again to the January retreat that's coming up, this day-long opportunity, I guess, that we're going to have to talk about priorities and talk about capacity and what's realistic in terms of expecting the staff to accomplish within certain timelines. That's an opportunity for us to weigh in about which ones we think are more important than others.
I think so, yes.
Okay. One other just quick comment before I go to other council members. We had a nice presentation earlier in the meeting from the chair of our Racial Equity Commission, who provided some comments from that commission on the implementation plan. I just wanted to make sure, Mr. Manager, that those comments are passed on to Trish and the rest of the staff, and that perhaps also even included in our discussion in January as we think about strategic priorities. Okay, Sammy, you're first, and then whoever raises their hand after that. Susan.
Thanks for this presentation, Trish, and laying it out, and clearly a lot. I guess one thing I'm curious or interested in as and lead up to our retreat is getting a sense of, if I understand correctly, this is where we're at currently versus what we intended as written in the plan. And if we can have an opportunity to contrast the two, maybe one way to do that is to break down these bars so that the top is what the plan wanted and the bottom is where we actually are. And the value of that will be for us to get a reality check in terms of staff capacity and how realistic the plan was in regard to accomplishing a lot of the things that we've set for ourselves to do. And it could help contextualize the conversation in terms of readjusting our expectations and upping our resources, whatever those dials that need to happen are, the prioritization of specific things. I'm grateful for this because I think that I see this as like developing some of those tools that we will need when we have that more in-depth conversation during our retreat. Other than that, just a general perspective comment that I'm sharing. I don't have any specific things at the moment. Thanks for all the work you've done on this and what you've shared with us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Susan, you're next.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for your update here, Trish. It's really helpful. I wanted to just sort of, first of all, follow up on what Sammy said about looking at where we are and compared to where we had hoped to be. Does that raise the question that we will need additional staffing to help with the implementation? I know we're looking for a transportation planner, but perhaps even more staffing will be needed in order to sort of stay on schedules, so something for us to be considering. Just a couple questions, Trish. One is the reduced negative effects of parking requirements. I was thinking in the comprehensive plan there was language more about actually eliminating the minimum parking requirements around transit corridors and so I was, this reduce negative effects, what is that suggesting?
Well, I think that is the short title for the evaluation of, there's a definition of transit corridors in the plan. And I believe that does involve, sorry, let me get to the page so I don't stumble through the words, but where the, where properties are going to meet those criteria and you evaluate those, I think that's part of that text amendment that would come forward, for consideration. So
some of those headings like reduce negative effects of parking requirements, et cetera, includes some specific tasks like addressing the minimums and some other
transit
amendments.
corridors.
that's right.
Got you.
There's I'm going to look at the implementation chapter instead of the transportation and mobility, but yeah.
I'm good on that. I'll take a look.
Okay, I think that is included within that project. That strategy.
Okay. Yeah, just a quick note on planting the seed is that, and I'll mention this at the retreat when we're together, but I hope we can look at actually eliminating minimum parking requirements in our downtown. And I thought it was a really interesting example with 201 North Greensboro, where we saw, kind of the role of bankers in terms of they're going to fund projects that are going to make it, and so they know that parking will be needed in order for some of these projects to make it, but it ended up being considerably less parking than was asked for in our ordinance. So that will be something that I will be trying to push up during the retreat. Another question was on the Chapel Hill recently approved an ordinance allowing more of the missing middle housing in single home neighborhoods. And tell me a little bit about where we are in that process in our comprehensive plan.
I believe that's part of our land use projects related to promoting affordable housing, land conservation. So, I mean, there's a couple of places where that shows up in the priority projects. It's about the small area planning piece.
That's
So
under the small area, okay.
I would say that that is located there. I don't believe it's listed as an affordable housing particular project, but I'm just going to check.
It's in the 2.2 as well, Trish, the strategy on increasing density along transit corridors.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Yes, I mean, there are two of these, and I think that even strategy 4.1, kind of those three all kind of blend together in this 2 text amendment, map amendment, 1 small area planning, umbrellas, yeah.
So with Chapel Hill's ordinance, do you see that as being something that we could do pretty easily by tweaking their ordinance to apply here to Carrboro? What's your thinking in terms of that process? And do you see that as being pretty straightforward?
Well, when we've talked about this before, the need to just do some of the impacts, the analysis of impacts is something that needs to occur. And, we need to do a racial equity analysis of our small area planning process as a step before we evaluate the details of that. So that's part of our scoping and process right now. So I will be evaluating the Chapel Hill ordinance and considering models like that, but I don't have an opinion on how it would or would not work here at this time. So I can't. I mean, I wouldn't say. So, we still have some work to do before I would seize on a model that I would want to pursue, is where I'm coming from, basically, based on my understanding of how we have to work to implement this plan. So.
Okay. Let's see, middle.
Not just have to, but want to work to implement the plan.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that's all for me. Thank you very much for the update.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list is Danny.
Thanks so much, Trish. Love to see all this. Very excited to see that y'all are identifying some of the same priorities and possibilities for the next year we are. Hearing a ton. We'll be riding on our sort of ability to get our ducks in a row in the coming January session. And so just with that in mind, I think a couple models that have come up in discussions we've had amongst ourselves that might be helpful for staff to be conversant in, just to help us get on the same page. I think as we look at the zoning reforms potentially, I think Burlington, North Carolina has pursued some really interesting changes to their LUO and their zoning that several of us have expressed at least a fascination with, that I think it would be helpful for staff to be able to kind of ping back and forth reactions to. Similarly, I wasn't present for it, but I know several of us were pretty excited about some of Asheville's downtown development reforms that they've made, and in particular project development review reforms that they made. I think really concentrating some of the work of project review within staff and changing sort of the purview of what council is responsible for in many cases. And I think it would be helpful for us to be able to have a productive dialogue across the days about those reforms. And there was one more. But it might not come. I think it's Mebane, North Carolina, has a parking requirement model that we have discussed quite a bit that I think would similarly sort of inform. Not to say that any of these would be like sort of one-to-one or directly adopted, but just as we've been kind of poking around, looking at the kinds of things we might be able to build toward, I think those would be helpful.
Absolutely.
And likewise, if in the sort of analysis stage, as you guys are doing this, if you identify other models or problems with those models or, any sort of reactions, I think it would be really helpful for us to just sort of be able to have that conversation on sort of as ongoing a basis as possible. And, we're happy to sort of research along with you, I know, in many cases.
Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Barbara?
Thank you, Trish, for the presentation. This continues to be a ton of work. And so your efforts and staff's efforts are very much appreciated. I just have a couple of things that are on here because I know we're going to talk more about prioritization in January. Under transportation and mobility, you have sidewalks analysis and sidewalk prioritization framework, new sidewalks, and I think cross-cutting with climate action and the environment. So this is, it's an assessment, right? It's an analysis, so it's town-wide. And so would that not involve would that not be cross-cutting with racial equity as well? Or am I missing something there? Because we have climate action and
Yeah,
environment.
I think that, honestly, that probably will be. I don't think that was, we might have missed it. I can check the plan and see if it's not included there, but I think you're right. I think that would be one that has a cross-cutting theme there too. So let me just look at the rest of it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And under recreation, parks, and cultural resources, you have promotion of nearby park facilities. Promotion, I think like advertisement or signage or wayfind. Am I thinking correctly with that? Or is that not exactly what that means when you say promotion?
Well, I think.
Oh, here, marketing campaigns, survey of facilities and programs?
Yeah, I think that, of course, I think there's Rec and Parks will be planning to do some surveying of users of our park facilities so that they can understand what interests and needs are. And then we currently do promote our neighboring, kind of work in partnership with Orange County and Chapel Hill. And I guess really Hillsborough too. I'm looking at Anita because she's here. But so that promotion is an existing, function that happens in the work that we do with trying to help our residents access the recreation parks and cultural resources opportunities throughout the county. So,
Okay. All right.
so we'll be continuing that work and also evaluating it the way we do it,
Okay.
who our constituents are, what they need, so we go forward.
All right. And I think I heard the mayor say something about the comments from the Racial Equity Commission. I'm not sure how do you see them being incorporated with what we have before us, or what you're thinking for the future?
I did receive an email with the information just this evening, and I did skim it and heard the chair's
Oh, you
presentation.
just got it, so you really haven't had a chance.
So I haven't had a chance really to think about it, but I think that we'll see how it plays into what's here and evaluate. I know Anne Marie's here, so evaluate whether it's a change, whether it would be a change from the way a project might have been scoped, or it wasn't beginning to be scoped already. I think that's what we'll do. We will assess what, consider what has been offered and see what we can do.
Okay, and I appreciate that. I just don't want these comments to get lost anywhere, and I don't think they're meant to be left for interpretation. I think it's just as it was presented here tonight.
Yeah, that was what I gathered too.
Okay, so I see you mentioned GARE, you mentioned the racial equity assessment lens, and you mentioned the racial equity analysis being completed in relation to all plan implementation. So can you talk a little bit about like what that looks like? I know that Anita I guess she would be involved as the Chief Race and Equity Officer. But what would that look like? What do you, or is that more a question for Anita?
I can take a stab at it, and then Anita can jump in and join me, or add to, or correct, if whatever.
Okay.
If either of those are good options.
I guess from your
perspective,
department, your
absolutely.
perspective for your department, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we've all the departments have done our policies, practices, and procedures lists, and we are working on completing the lenses associated with those items that we've identified. Those, as I said, they're policies, practices, and procedures. And our view is that we will be categorizing the priority projects as to whether they fall under one of those ones we've already identified, related to traffic calming or related to customer service, for example, or something like that, related to the land use ordinance, text amendment or map amendment process. And the lens will be completed as we begin these projects. For those projects that don't really fall under a lens we've already identified, a policy, practice, or procedure, we'll do one for that. We'll articulate what is the analysis we need to do, and we will, articulate the desired results. What is the outcome? What is the? We'll go through the process of using the lens to assess them. That's my understanding of what we'll be doing as we implement this plan.
Okay. Anita, did you have anything? Were you okay? Why? Aren't you the SME? Was that? I don't want to force you to come down. I'm not your boss. So I don't. Let me put my hands up and back.
Anything more to add to what Trish shared?
If you don't have anything, then that's fine. If you do, that's even better.
Good evening. Let me just say that Trish did pretty much summarize it at this point. We do though have to try to figure out how we're going to align being able to do the lens, because as you know, the racial equity lens is quite extensive. And so it's going to be this opportunity to figure out how we can make that happen. But in the nutshell, absolutely, we will be doing a lens, but we need to determine how we can make sure that it aligns with the timeline of the particular project.
Okay.
So that's something we've got to work out. So we're still working on that, but for the most part, yes, that's how we will handle that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Anita.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go back a little bit to my comments earlier this evening, and this is for Mr. White, I think more than for you. So we get a lot of reports. We get updates on transit, affordable housing, economic development. I would like to see periodic updates on our race and equity work. As a council, we have no idea what's happening. We see it a lot on paper, but certainly I know I would like to see what is happening department-wise, project-wise. How is it progressing? And I guess that would be Mr. White and maybe Anita. I don't know what my colleagues feel about that, but I think it's a good report to have to make sure the rubber is meeting the road the way that I think we intend for it to. And that was for Mr. White. And did you talk about the low-hanging fruit here in the next year or so? I think you did. You had a slide there, didn't you, with 5 or 6 items on it?
Yeah.
What's going to happen here? Yes. Okay. And so this is what we're hoping for fiscal year 23-24. And you think, staff-wise, we'll be able to stay on schedule, pretty much?
Well, as I said, I don't want to, did I cut you off?
I was finished.
Yeah, I'm expecting that some product, report, request for funding, update will come forward with regard to these items in the next fiscal year, the rest of this quarter for some of them, and the fiscal year 24 for others, and that you will be seeing agenda items related to things, being asked to consider options, feedback, hearing advisory board discussions about some actions that are linked to the comprehensive plan, that kind of thing. So that's what again, this is my snapshot. This is our today. We're continuing on our work, so there'll be more as we go forward.
That sounds good. I think that's it for me, Trish. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just kind of reiterating something I said before, my sense is that even that could change a little depending on our conversation in January about as we really dig into what our priorities are and what our needs are and our capacity to achieve some of the things that we set out here.
That's right.
This is kind of, as you said, is a snapshot for right now, but we have a lot more discussion to be had related also to the budget for the next season too, which will actually make it possible to do any of these things. So
Yeah. The work plan, and it's our schedule of expectations right now, and what we're doing. So
thank you, Trish.
you're welcome.
Randy hasn't gone yet, Sammy, so I'll go to Randy and then go to Sammy unless Eleazar needs to speak.
I have got to move this mask. I can't breathe.
Good to take.
Thank you, Trish and staff for, oh my God, is this a heavy lift? And I'm really glad we're at the point that we are with the comprehensive plan. You said something that really piqued my interest because one of the things I haven't yet figured out is what is the mechanism and this is a very odd question, I know, but it helps me to understand how not only in our role as council, but in terms of advisory board and our engagement with advisory boards, what is the mechanism by which interdepartment systems approach is going to be designed? I mean, there's got to be a master plan to make that happen. Can you just share with us a little snapshot of what that looks like?
Well, I think there are interdepartmental teams that are going to be working on those projects that have really cross-cutting relationships. So that's one way, but then there's also an assigned lead. But we'll be working as teams to be able to incorporate those activities, those visions, et cetera. They'll be, and different projects are going to have different tracking mechanisms for them because they're more of a project. They have a lot of steps that you can, check boxes. Others are much more going to be more process oriented. They can still be reported on that way, but they're much more about. There are going to be various steps of engagement. They're iterative, so. I don't know if I have an answer to your question per se, but generally speaking, these are going to be teams-based kind of efforts whenever there's cross-cutting work, and that occurs. I mean, with the climate action underpinnings and the racial equity underpinnings for many of these priority projects. Anita, and when another person joins the staff with her, is going to be working closely with these projects. I think as we work on scoping them and moving them forward and checking ourselves and looking at that. Not entirely. I mean, there's going to be a lot of other work they have to do too, but they're part of the team.
So, yeah, I'm trying to drill down one depth, one layer lower into, is it, what kind, is it done through conversations across teams and I'll tell you why I'm asking, because working with the climate action team and working with the race equity team, I don't see that there's a cross-pollination of that conversation, and those are the two pillars. So I would like to know at what point, both these groups, they have a cross conversation, and you all are kind of laying out for us, what does that look like? Because I can understand within your departments, but then when it has to be implemented in terms of the community and our advisory boards, it needs to be more of the threads of the conversation need to be weaved together ahead of time. And equally for us, because there has been no serious conversation amongst us about the relationship between, climate advocacy, mitigation, and, initiatives and race equity. They're standing two pillars that are like Doric columns that are, parallel. I think we need to create a substantive roadmap for how they're going to work together. And a perfect example of where they do through the projects, they have a cross current is the weatherization or the electrification and some of the projects like that. But I think it's almost as if a project can't guarantee that that conversation is substantive. That's an outcome. So what I'm trying to get at is, because working with the REC, and thank you, Barbara, for bringing up what you did, because a report is a great idea and definitely needed. But you know, when Barbara and I are working with the REC, one of the things that became really clear, and thank you, Anita, is that the REC herself probably needs to go through each of these, as they did for affordable housing, to be able to give feedback, because otherwise you won't hear it. And that's something that I think came out of one of the REC conversations. So when we talk about process, the process isn't just what has to be checked off in a bureaucratic way. Mm-hmm. It needs to be the development of conversation over time. And I'll give you another example where it will be fruitful for us to have that. And it is in how we launch and build the green neighborhoods and that initiative, because that's an example of where, you know, different neighborhoods are doing different things, but how do you get that cross conversation to occur? So I think those were my 2 points. Yeah, I think I rolled them into one. All right.
There you go, cross-pollination. Randy. Next up, I have Sammy, and then we'll go to Eleazar.
Oh, Eleazar hasn't gone, I don't think.
Go ahead, Eleazar.
Yeah. First, thank you so much to you and everyone on staff who's been working on this. I was a little taken aback when you said tomorrow is like the day that we 6-month anniversary of this thing, which is fun. So I most of my comments are what I wanted to talk about. I'm going to reserve to when we have that meeting in January to do a lot of prioritization. I just had a couple of questions. Kind of first, when is the executive summary expected to come out? Can you remind me that?
I'm not sure I mean, I think we'd like to be finished with it by the end of the year, but I'm not certain of the date yet. So.
And kind of around that, what is the plan to get that communicated or that kind of out into the community? Is there like a comms plan already, or is there a community conversation model that are going to be used, or is it going to be one of those things like, all right, here it is, we're going to publish it?
Well, I don't think we haven't planned the launch yet, so we've been working on the details of it, but. Yeah, I think that we will want to share it with. We did a fair amount of engagement with El Centro, for example, in discussing the question of language, specifically, and when this is a consideration as we move forward and look at our work and just about how we present our agenda items and do further outreach and engagement, and the languages, multiple languages to engage with the community. But so we don't have we don't have our outreach plan. I mean, our plan to launch it yet. So, but we will. But so if you have some suggestions about things you'd like us to consider, please do share.
No, I mean, so I would definitely encourage to look at not just El Centro, but all the other community partners who hold strong constituencies here in Carrboro. The Literacy Center, for example. Even one of the things that I've loved that Damon has done Mayor has done over the years have been kind of like those office hours. That's been a great way to interact with community. I don't know. I just want to see as we implement or push this out to be like very strategic as to where we show up. And, a big part of this is that racial equity, right? So I want to make sure that as we're pushing this out and of course we're doing priorities next year and that's going to be top of mind for me. But as this executive summary is presented, and you're working on this outreach plan, we're targeting specific areas of town that are don't have the most exposure, right?
Sure.
And if I can be of any help in that, in either organizing, I don't know, a community meeting at El Ojillo or whatever, please use me as a resource. And I'm not going to speak for the rest of my colleagues, but I'm sure that several of us would be able to help build some of those community forums or community conversations if need be.
Yeah.
So that's that's the only thing I had top of mind. Everything else that I have on the plan itself and prioritizing, I'm going to just hold that to January to flush that out.
Super. You bet. Thank you.
Thanks, Eleazar. Sammy?
Yeah, it just comes to mind in hearing some of the things mentioned here that some of these, like when we prioritize our ARA funding, I feel are lend themselves to more council input. So I'm thinking specifically of like downtown parking as an example. And there are models like you were pointing out, and also questions. It's one thing to change the ordinance so it's not required. It's another thing to ask the question of, okay, then who is going to provide it and how is it going to be paid for? And so I want us to, in that retreat, incorporate as part of our process a means through which we can identify those items that might require like a work session for us to really delve in and put on the table some of our ideas of what we want to see before staff invest a lot of energy and then maybe we ask them to redo it because we had something else in mind. So I just wanted to plant that seed as like a lead up opportunity for, as that retreat is being designed, one of the things I would hope that could be included. Thank you.
Thanks, Sammy. Well, Trish, you've heard, I think, some good thoughts tonight about that might hopefully help plan for the retreat in January, I think, in terms of maybe what council members are expecting to get done during that time. But as well as just maybe even the idea that we're here willing to do some pre-work if you and Mr. Manager, if you need us to be doing some work ahead of time, some homework to make that a productive discussion. Whether it's about telling you what our priorities are in our heads right now today and seeing how that flows in the conversation, or some of these other ideas like Danny brought up around models that other communities have used, or Sammy indicating where is the council going to be involved here and where is it not, and all of those things. So,
whatever's most helpful.
hopeful that you'll take these
Know what to
comments
do.
tonight and as an
Okay.
indication of some things that we'd like to achieve during the retreat in January.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. No, I think we're just getting an update tonight and looking forward to the retreat next year.
That's right.
Thank you very much, Trish.
You bet. You're most
Anita
welcome.
for weighing in as well.
Thank you.
Council members, that was the last formal item on our agenda. Is there anything more before we adjourn? Sammy?
Yeah, just Mr. Manager, can you remind me what your threshold is for what amount of money triggers needing to get approval from the town council?
$60,000.
$60,000, okay. And I'm just asking because in regard to this locking in the Duke incentive, I think we're well below that threshold, and which is probably why it's not been an item. Now I understand that. And very much encourage you to do that analysis of what the cost benefit is for potentially losing that, but potentially making a lot of savings if we do pursue that. And thank you for all your work on that.
Eleazar, is that a motion to adjourn?
No, I just wanted to say something real quick.
Okay, go
and
ahead.
Then I'll move for that. I just wanted to forecast to folks on the council that I'm going to be working with leaders in the LGBTQ movement and community to bring forth a resolution at the beginning of next year. I talked to some of you about supporting that, just do the timeline and as we're moving forward. I just wanted to forecast that is going to be coming at the beginning of January so that we can just keep an eye out for that. I'll send some language as soon as we finalize that, but just wanted to forecast that for members. And with that, I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Seconded.
I'll appreciate your leadership on that particular resolution, Eleazar, as well as keeping in touch with our community partners and making sure that whatever we do is meeting their needs and not what we think their needs are. Thank you. We are adjourned.